My 14-year-old son looked me in the eye and said he didn't want my last name anymore because his wealthy stepfather was a real man. I signed the adoption papers without arguing, and 10 days later, their perfect life started to crack in ways they never saw coming. What none of them realized was that replacing a father comes with a price tag, and consequences don't care about ego. My name's Ethan Callahan, 38 male. I didn't even notice the moment my son started leaving me. It wasn't some dramatic, I hate you, Dad, at first. It was small, like termites. Logan, 14, male, stopped calling me Dad in texts. It became Ethan. Then it became nothing, just a thumbs-up emoji when I asked what time to pick him up. His replies got clipped and cold, like he was answering a customer service survey. Meanwhile, his mom, Melissa Langford, 36 female, kept posting these glossy little snapshots of their life like a commercial. Rooftop dinners, new sneakers, Logan grinning on a boat with a fishing rod too expensive for a kid who still forgets deodorant. Her husband, Brandon Langford, 42 male, was always in the background of those photos, smiling like a man who won a prize. Brandon's the kind of guy who says things like alpha mindset and actually believes it. He wears his success like cologne. He's got the leased Mercedes, the private school tuition, the we summer in Cancun vibe. And me? I'm the guy eating ramen on the floor of a studio apartment because my couch got repossessed right after the divorce. I pay my $425 a month and pretend it doesn't hurt that my kid's wearing shoes that cost more than my groceries. I'm not perfect. I know that. I wasn't the fun dad after the split because I didn't have fun money. My weekends were hikes, library trips, and homemade pancakes. I taught Logan how to change a tire in a parking lot using a borrowed jack. He used to beam like I'd handed him a trophy. Then Brandon started teaching him to be a man. The shift hit me in the gut the day Logan showed up for my weekend wearing Brandon's football jersey. Not a team jersey, Brandon's own. It was so big on him it swallowed his shoulders like he wanted to disappear inside Brandon's identity. We went to dinner. Logan spent the whole time texting under the table, the glow of his phone reflecting off his face like a tiny screen-sized wall between us. I asked about school. He shrugged. Fine. I asked if he wanted to go hiking the next day like we used to. He didn't even look up. We already went last weekend with my real dad. That word, real, did something nasty inside me, like a switch being flipped in a dark room. I tried to laugh it off. I'm your real dad. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were calm. That was the scariest part. No anger, just certainty. You're not, he said. You're just there. When we got back to my place, he didn't even step inside. He stood on the walkway, hands in his pockets, staring at my front door like it smelled. This apartment is embarrassing, he said, loud enough for my neighbor to hear through the open window. I felt my throat tighten. Logan. He cut me off, voice sharp, rehearsed. Like he'd practiced in the mirror. Brandon says you're a loser. And honestly, he's right. A man provides. So I should have a man's name. I blinked. What? My new dad's adopting me, he said. We're changing my last name. I don't want yours anymore. Behind him, Melissa stood on the sidewalk with her arms crossed. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't upset. She was smiling. And my son, my kid, looked me dead in the face and said, sign it, or you're proving you're weak. Something in me went painfully still. Like my heart didn't break, like it froze. I heard my own voice come out flat, almost polite. Fine, I said. If you want a new name, take his. Logan's mouth twitched like he'd won. Melissa's smile widened. And then they walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway of the life I built out of scraps, feeling like I'd just been erased. That night, I didn't cry. I stared at my last text thread with Logan, months of me trying, him responding less and less, until my phone screen dimmed and went black. And in that dark reflection, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit. They didn't want my love. They wanted my money. And Brandon? Brandon had no idea what he'd just volunteered to inherit. The next morning I called my lawyer. His name's Daniel Reeves, 50 male. Divorced twice. Permanently unimpressed with human drama. He's the only reason my divorce from Melissa didn't bankrupt me. You sure about this? He asked when I told him Logan wanted Brandon to adopt him. Adoption terminates your parental rights. No custody, no decision-making, no support obligation either. That last part hung in the air. No support obligation. For 4 years, I'd paid $425 every single month. Never late. Not once. Even when I had to pick up night shifts at the warehouse. Even when my car needed brakes and I drove it squealing like a dying animal for 2 weeks because child support came first. Meanwhile, Melissa and Brandon posted Cancun sunsets and steakhouse dinners like they were starring in a reality show called Upgraded. I stared at the paperwork Daniel emailed over. My name. Logan's name. Brandon's name. Lines waiting for signatures that would erase me. Once it's finalized, Daniel said carefully, you're legally nothing to him, and he's legally nothing to you. I swallowed. And Brandon becomes fully responsible? Everything, Daniel said. Tuition, insurance, medical, college contributions if required by their agreement. All of it. I almost laughed, because Brandon loved calling himself Logan's real dad in front of people. Loved correcting teachers at events. Loved that image. I wondered if he loved $3,750 a month in private school tuition. I signed the papers without reading them twice. Melissa texted me within minutes. Proud of you for being mature about this. Mature. Like I'd just agreed to split furniture evenly. 10 days later, Daniel called me at work. Court approved it this morning, he said. Adoption finalized. Brandon Langford is Logan's legal father. Your child support ends immediately. I was standing in the back of the warehouse when he said it, surrounded by stacked boxes and dust and fluorescent lights that buzzed like mosquitoes. Immediately? I asked. Effective today. Something strange happened inside me. Not joy, not revenge, relief, a physical release. Like I'd been holding my breath for 4 years and didn't even realize it. That night my phone exploded. Melissa first. What did you do? She screamed the second I answered. I signed what you asked for. You knew child support would stop. Yes. You should have warned us. I leaned against my kitchen counter. My cheap laminate countertop. The one Logan had called embarrassing. Warned you about what? I asked quietly. That adoption means responsibility? Behind her, I could hear Brandon yelling. Actual panic in his voice. We can't afford this. What the hell did you tell him? Melissa came back to the phone, her voice smaller now. The school says we owe the full tuition balance. They said your payments were tied to the old agreement. Not my school, I said. Not my kid. The silence that followed felt like oxygen finally entering a sealed room. You're being vindictive, she whispered. No, I said. I'm being exactly what you wanted me to be. She hung up. Then Logan called. I let it ring. Then again. Then again. 43 missed calls that night between the three of them. I didn't answer. For the first time since the divorce, I slept 8 straight hours. But revenge, real revenge, wasn't screaming or insults. It was math. And math was about to dismantle the illusion Brandon had built his life on. Brandon lasted exactly 3 weeks before the cracks started showing. I didn't go looking for updates. I tried to stay out of it. But chaos has a way of knocking on your door when you used to fund it. The first sign was the school. Logan had been attending St. Andrew's Academy, private, polished, $48,000 a year polished. Melissa loved posting photos of him in that blazer. Future CEO, she'd caption them. 4 weeks after the adoption finalized, I got a letter in a cream envelope with the school's crest pressed into the corner. They'd forgotten to remove me from the emergency contact list. Mr. Callahan, it read, we understand there may be confusion regarding financial responsibility following the adoption. Please be advised Mr. Brandon Langford is now listed as the legal parent responsible for tuition. The outstanding balance for the semester is $19,600. Payment must be received by the 22nd to avoid withdrawal. I sat back in my kitchen chair and let out a slow breath. $19,600. That's when my phone rang. Melissa. I answered this time. Ethan, she started, voice tight. You need to call the school and clarify that you're still contributing. They think Brandon is fully responsible. They don't think, I said evenly. He is. Her breathing quickened. You paid before. You could at least split it. I paid because I was legally obligated. I'm not anymore. Behind her, I heard something shatter. Glass. Brandon yelling. This is sabotage, he shouted in the background. He tricked us. I closed my eyes and leaned against the counter. Tricked you into what? Signing paperwork you pushed for. You knew, Melissa snapped. You knew this would crush us. You told our son I was a loser who couldn't provide. You told him Brandon was the real man. Now he is. She started crying. Not soft tears. The dramatic, gasping kind. We can't afford this, Ethan. The business is slow right now. There it was. The business. Brandon's consulting firm. The one that supposedly funded their vacations and Mercedes lease. The one that apparently ran on smoke and credit. You should have considered that before replacing me, I said quietly. She hung up on me. 2 days later, Logan showed up at my apartment unannounced. No Melissa, no Brandon. He was wearing his St. Andrew's blazer, but it looked wrinkled. Like it hadn't been dry cleaned. His hair wasn't styled the way Melissa used to fuss over. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. He stood in the middle of my tiny living room, staring at the same second-hand couch he'd mocked weeks ago. They might pull me out of school, he said finally. I didn't answer. Brandon's trying to get a loan, Logan continued. Mom's freaking out. They keep fighting about money. He glanced at me, eyes red around the edges. Did you do this on purpose? I met his gaze. No, I said. I did exactly what you asked. He flinched at that. You could help, he said, voice cracking. You make good money. I felt something heavy shift in my chest. Not anger, not pity, reality. I make enough to survive, I said. Not enough to finance someone else's fantasy. His jaw tightened. For a second, I saw the old defiance flare up. Then it faded. They said you'd cave, he whispered. I let that hang in the air. But here's what neither Logan nor Melissa knew yet. The school wasn't the only bill coming. Insurance was tied to Brandon now. Medical responsibility was Brandon's. College fund contributions? Brandon's. And when someone builds their life on leased cars and borrowed status, one real obligation is enough to make the whole thing collapse. Brandon had wanted to prove he was the real father. The universe was about to test just how real he could be. The eviction notice came in early October. I didn't hear it from Melissa. I heard it from Logan. He showed up at my apartment again. No warning, no text, this time without the blazer. Just jeans and a hoodie that looked like it hadn't been washed in days. His knuckles were scraped. What happened to your hand? I asked. He shrugged. Nothing. It wasn't nothing. Later I found out it was a fight at Roosevelt Middle, the public school he'd been transferred to after St. Andrews officially withdrew him. Some kid had called him Discount Dad because Brandon's bankruptcy filing had made it into the gossip chain. Apparently, when your stepfather's consulting firm collapses and 3 creditors file liens in 1 week, people talk. Logan had swung first. That night, Melissa called again. She didn't scream this time. She sobbed. They're foreclosing, Ethan, she said. The bank won't negotiate. Brandon hid credit card balances from me. Lines of credit. The Mercedes is already gone. They came with a tow truck at 6 this morning. Neighbors were watching. I pictured it. Brandon in his pressed polo, trying to argue with a guy in a neon vest. Melissa standing in the driveway clutching her phone. Curtains twitching up and down the street. And, I asked, you could stop this. There it was again. The belief that I was still their parachute. How? I said flatly. You could agree to help with tuition, or refinance the house in your name. We'd put Logan back on your insurance. We could reverse the adoption if we prove duress. I actually laughed at that. Reverse it? I repeated. Melissa, you stood behind him while he called me a loser. She went silent. Behind her, I heard Brandon yelling again. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was panic. She's recording me, he shouted. You're trying to ruin me. Then something crashed. Hard. Wood splintering. Brandon just punched the kitchen cabinet, Logan said suddenly. I hadn't realized he'd picked up the extension in the background. He's been breaking things, Logan continued quietly. Plates, doors. Yesterday, he threw my backpack across the room because I asked about college. My stomach tightened. Is he hurting you? I asked. No, Logan said quickly. Then slower. Not like that. Not like that. The line went dead. 2 nights later, someone slashed my tires. All 4. My landlord's security camera caught Brandon's SUV circling the block an hour before it happened. It was grainy but clear enough. He texted me at 2:14 a.m. This is your fault. I didn't respond. Instead, I filed a police report and forwarded the footage to Daniel. If Brandon wanted war, I wasn't going to shout. I was going to document. The real turning point came the following week. Child Protective Services called me. Brandon had been arrested for domestic assault. Melissa had called 911 after he shoved her into a glass coffee table during an argument about debt collectors. The neighbors heard the crash, heard her scream. Logan was in the house when it happened. CPS needed emergency placement. Legally, I had no obligation, no custody rights, no parental authority. I could say no. And part of me, God help me, considered it. But then I pictured Logan sitting in a patrol car under flashing lights, watching the illusion of his real father get handcuffed. Choices have consequences, and Brandon's were finally catching up. The question now wasn't whether Brandon would fall. He already had. The question was whether I was going to let my son fall with him. When CPS asked if I would take Logan temporarily, I didn't answer right away. The social worker, Officer Ramirez, early 40s, calm voice, tired eyes, stood in my doorway holding a clipboard like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Legally, she said, you're not required. Adoption terminated your parental rights. But Mrs. Langford listed you as an emergency contact. The alternative is foster placement until the court reviews Melissa's situation. Foster care. The word hit like cold water. I looked past her to where Logan stood on the sidewalk with a duffel bag. Same kid who had told me I was a loser. Same kid who chose another man's name over mine. He wouldn't look at me. Brandon was still in county jail after shoving Melissa into that glass table. Apparently, the argument escalated when a repo agent showed up again, this time for furniture that had been financed. Financed. Everything in that house had been financed. I stepped aside. He can stay, I said. Logan's shoulders dropped just slightly. Not relief. More like the tension paused. Temporary, I told myself. Just until Melissa stabilizes. Just until court sorts this out. The first night was awkward, painfully quiet. Logan sat at my kitchen table, the same cheap laminate one he'd once mocked, and stared at a bowl of pasta like it was foreign. You don't have to pretend, I said. This isn't permanent. He nodded. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to shouting. Logan was having a nightmare. Don't, he yelled from the guest room. Stop, I rushed in. He was sitting upright, breathing fast, eyes wild. He was throwing things, Logan muttered. He broke the TV. Mom was bleeding. I didn't say, I told you so. I didn't say anything. I just sat on the edge of the bed until his breathing slowed. The next morning, Melissa showed up unannounced. Hair unbrushed, sunglasses hiding a bruise that wasn't fully covered. She pounded on my door like she wanted to splinter it. You can't keep him from me, she screamed when I opened it. I'm not, I said evenly. CPS is. She tried to push past me. Logan, she yelled into the apartment. We're going home. There is no home, I said quietly. That broke her. She started sobbing, sliding down my hallway wall. Ugly crying. The kind that's not curated for Instagram. I didn't know, she kept repeating. He said the business was fine. He said we were ahead. You knew enough to replace me, I said. She looked up at me then. Not angry, not superior, small. Can you just help us? She whispered. Just until Brandon gets out. Just until we regroup. There it was again. The safety net. The assumption I would always catch them. Before I could answer, Logan appeared behind me. He didn't go to her. He didn't run into her arms. He just stood there. Mom, he said quietly, I'm staying here. She stared at him like he'd slapped her. You don't mean that. He swallowed. I do. Her face twisted, shock turning into rage. This is his fault, she screamed, pointing at me. He's poisoning you against us. I stepped between them. No, I said calmly. Reality is. Melissa left that morning after kicking over my trash can and denting the side of my mailbox with her car door when she sped off. That night, my phone buzzed. Brandon, from jail. You think you won? I stared at the screen. No, I hadn't won. But for the first time in years, I wasn't losing either. And Logan, sitting at my table doing homework under a cheap kitchen light, looked smaller than 14. He looked like a kid. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally starting to understand what it cost to choose the wrong man as your hero. Brandon made bail 3 days later. I found out because Logan's phone started buzzing nonstop during dinner. Unknown numbers, text after text. Tell your mom to answer, you're staying with him? After everything I did for you? Ungrateful. Logan's hand was shaking as he set the phone face down. He's not supposed to contact you, I said carefully. There's a temporary order. He doesn't care, Logan muttered. That night, Brandon showed up outside my building. He didn't knock at first. He just sat in his borrowed SUV, since the Mercedes was long gone, engine idling, headlights cutting across my living room walls like interrogation lamps. Then he started honking. Long, angry blasts that made my neighbors peek through blinds. Logan froze. He's drunk, Logan whispered. Brandon finally got out and stormed toward the entrance, pounding on the locked glass door. Callahan, he shouted, you hiding behind paperwork now? I stepped outside before he could escalate further. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. Ego cracked, but still loud. You think you're some hero? He snapped. You sabotaged me. You sabotaged yourself, I said calmly. His jaw clenched. You let me adopt him knowing the finances would shift. That's entrapment. You wanted to be his real father, I replied evenly. That includes the bills. He shoved me. Hard enough that I stumbled back into the railing. Neighbors were watching now, phones out. You ruined my life, he screamed. No, I said quietly. Debt did. Police arrived before he could swing again. He resisted, yelled, called me a coward while they cuffed him the second time in a week. Logan watched from the window, and something in his face changed. Not admiration, not fear, disillusionment, the myth finally collapsing. The next morning, Melissa called again, her voice hollow. He lost the consulting clients, she said. They pulled contracts after the arrest. We're filing bankruptcy. I didn't respond. I didn't know about the credit cards, she continued weakly. He hid statements, used new accounts to pay old ones. A pyramid of lies. You married the image, I said softly. Not the man. She didn't argue. 2 days later, Logan came home from school with a split lip. Another fight. Some kid said I picked the wrong dad, he said flatly. I cleaned the cut in silence. Did you? He asked suddenly. The question hung between us. I looked at him. You picked what you thought was strength, I said. Sometimes strength is loud, sometimes it's quiet. He didn't cry. He just nodded. CPS scheduled a hearing for permanent placement while Melissa completed court-mandated therapy and Brandon awaited trial for domestic assault and property damage. Legally, I was still nothing. No parental rights, no authority. But every morning I drove Logan to school, helped him with algebra, sat through awkward silence at dinner that slowly became conversation again. Brandon tried contacting me one last time through a mutual acquaintance, offering to negotiate. If you help clear some of the debt, the message read, we can smooth everything over. I didn't respond. Sweet revenge isn't loud. It's boundaries. And for the first time, I wasn't stepping in to fix what they broke. I was just showing up for the kid who finally understood what breaking things really costs. Winter hit early that year. Not the pretty postcard kind. The kind that turns sidewalks into gray ice and makes everything feel colder than it should. Logan had been living with me for 3 months by then, still temporary on paper. CPS hearings kept getting pushed while Melissa attended therapy, and Brandon's assault case crawled through court. Brandon wasn't allowed near Logan. Protective order didn't stop him from trying. He started parking across from Logan's school. Not close enough to violate the order, just close enough to be seen. One afternoon, Logan got into my truck pale as a ghost. "He was there again," he said quietly. I gripped the steering wheel harder than I meant to. "Did he approach you?" "No, just watched." That was worse somehow. I filed another report, added it to the growing folder Daniel kept building. Brandon's court date finally came. Melissa asked if Logan wanted to attend. He said no. I went anyway, not as a father legally, but as the emergency guardian on record. Brandon stood in front of the judge looking smaller than the version that used to smirk at me from a Mercedes driver's seat. The charges stuck. Domestic assault, property destruction, violation of temporary protective order, 6 months county jail. When the judge read the sentence, Brandon turned his head and locked eyes with me. Pure venom, like I had personally designed his downfall. But the only thing I had done was step aside and let gravity do its job. Melissa filed for divorce 2 weeks later. The house was gone. The leased car gone. Bankruptcy proceedings in motion. She moved into a 1-bedroom rental across town. The day Logan helped her carry boxes up those narrow apartment stairs, he didn't say much, just moved quietly, focused. Later that night, he sat at my kitchen table again, the same one he once mocked, and finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. "Why didn't you fight the adoption?" I took my time answering. "Because you wanted it," I said. "And I wasn't going to beg to be chosen." He stared at the tabletop. I thought a real man had money, big house, cars." "That's marketing," I said gently, "not character." Silence stretched between us. "I called you a loser," he whispered. "I remember." "I meant it then." "I know." He finally looked up. "I don't now." That didn't fix anything. It didn't rewind time, but it shifted something. The real turning point came in March. Logan got nominated for academic improvement at Roosevelt Middle, the same school he'd been embarrassed to attend. Award ceremony in the gym, metal folding chairs, fluorescent lights. No blazer. Just a simple collared shirt he picked out himself. When they called his name, he looked for me in the crowd. Not Melissa, not Brandon. Me. Afterward, outside in the cold parking lot, he shoved his hands into his pockets. "I'm changing it back," he said. "Changing what?" "My last name, back to Callahan." I swallowed hard. "Legally," I said carefully, "that won't change what happened." "I know," he said. "But names matter." I nodded slowly. "They do." That night, I sat alone on my balcony with a drink and realized something unexpected. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reconstruction. Brandon lost his empire. Melissa lost her illusion. Logan lost his hero. But maybe, just maybe, he found something steadier in the rubble. And for the first time since he'd stood on my doorstep and rejected my name, I didn't feel erased. I felt present. And present matters more than paperwork. 8 months after Logan first showed up on my doorstep with a duffel bag and scraped knuckles, CPS closed the case. Melissa had completed therapy. She'd kept a steady job at a medical office for 6 straight months. No missed payments on her new rental. No further incidents. The court deemed her home stable. Brandon was still serving his sentence. Legally, nothing changed for me. I was still not Logan's father on paper. When the social worker, Officer Ramirez, came by to finalize placement options, she asked Logan directly. "You can return to your mother full-time," she said, "or we can pursue a longer guardianship arrangement here." Logan looked between us. He didn't rush. That's how I knew he'd grown. I'll go back to Mom, he said finally. But I'm not losing him again. He meant me. Melissa stood in my doorway that afternoon when he packed. No screaming this time. No accusations. Just quiet humility. Thank you, she said softly, for taking him when I couldn't. I nodded. I didn't do it for you, I replied. She gave a small, understanding smile. When Logan carried his last box down the stairs, he hesitated by my truck. Feels weird, he admitted. It should, I said. He studied me for a moment. I can still come over, Saturdays? You don't need permission anymore, I said. You just show up. That was the difference. Before, I had been a scheduled obligation. Now I was chosen. The weeks that followed weren't dramatic. No big speeches, just consistency. Saturday breakfasts. Algebra homework at my kitchen table. Occasional late-night calls when Melissa and Logan argued like normal parents and teenagers do. He officially filed the paperwork to change his name back to Callahan. Melissa signed it without protest. It didn't erase the adoption. Brandon remained his legal father until age 18. But the name on Logan's school forms changed again, and that mattered to him. The final moment, the one that sealed everything, came a year after the adoption. Roosevelt Middle held a ceremony for academic excellence and community leadership. Logan stood on stage taller, steadier, different. When the principal read his name, Logan Callahan, it echoed through the gym. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look confused. He looked certain. Afterward, we went to the same cheap diner we'd visited when he was little. Red vinyl booths, sticky menus, nothing impressive. He slid into the seat across from me and said quietly, "You didn't have to come back." I stirred my coffee. "I never left," I said. He shook his head. "You could have." I let that sit. "I signed the papers because you thought you wanted something else," I said. "But being a father isn't about paperwork. It's about showing up when things fall apart." He swallowed. "I thought real men were loud," he admitted. "Brandon was loud." "Real strength doesn't need to announce itself," I said. "It just stays." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting orange light across the windshield. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My son, my name, my place in his life. But what I learned, the hard way, is that revenge doesn't have to burn the house down. Sometimes sweet revenge is just letting people live with the choices they made, while you quietly build something stronger. Brandon lost the image he worshipped. Melissa lost the fantasy she chased. Logan lost his illusion. And I gained something I never had before. A son who chose me back. Not because of money, not because of a court order, not because of obligation, but because when everything collapsed, when the cars were towed, the house foreclosed, the hero arrested, I was the one who showed up. And sometimes that's the only definition of fatherhood that matters.